Oh, yeah.
This week, millions of Americans had an opportunity to sit around the Thanksgiving table or have Zoom screens around that table to come together in a great American tradition of the Thanksgiving dinner. And it's an opportunity that I've always felt that we have every Shabbos, an opportunity to sit around the table, to encounter people, even in these times when things are more limited in our opportunity for direct contact with one another. There's always that opportunity for communication. Whenever there's an opportunity for communication, there's an opportunity for miscommunication. If we look in the stories of our patriarchs and matriarchs, we encounter not a small share of situations where there seems to be a miscommunication, at least having patriarchs and matriarchs not on the same page. Starting with Avraham and Sarah, they disagreed about Yishmael. Sarah knew that he had to go, and Avraham had more sympathy for his beloved son. When it came to the Akedah, Avraham's involved, but we don't have any indication whether Sarah was in the loop. Moving forward to Yitzchak and to Rivka, here we encounter what many commentaries see as being on a different page and an inability to communicate. Think about Yaakov and Esau. Rivka loved Yaakov. Rivka knew Yaakov was destined to be the son through whom the Abrahamic tradition would continue. Yitzchak loved Esau. Was he in the know? Did they communicate? There seems to be a lack of communication. And now we're introduced to Yaakov and Rachel and Leah. We have a difference in how Yaakov related to these two wives. He loved Rachel. Leah is sinuah. She is hated. There doesn't seem to be a strong, equal relationship going on in that family. And when Rachel sees that Leah has children and she does not, she says to Yaakov, "Give me children, otherwise I'm going to die." And Yaakov doesn't really reply in a sympathetic way. He says, "I have children, you don't." And then moving forward into the story of the children of Yaakov and Rachel and Leah and Bilhah and Zilpah, the brothers don't get along. We see that it is often the inability to communicate. They weren't able to communicate with one another always that effectively in order to have, to be on the same page and to have a more productive, a deeper, a more solidified relationship. And this really brings into relief the idea expressed by King Shlomo in Mishlei, Mavet v'chaim biyad halashon. Death and life are dependent on the tongue. It's interesting that Mavet comes first. The idea that there's almost an expectation that when we speak, we have to be aware of and sensitive to, cognizant of the detrimental and deleterious effects that our language can have when miscommunication takes place. We idealize and hope that our speech leads to chayim, but first things first, recognize that mavet biyad halashon, death, destruction, inability to communicate, and frayed and fractured relationships. That's also when it comes to our speech. And this is because human beings are, at our essence, midabrim. We are called midaber. In the hierarchy of the creations that exist, there's the inanimate object, the domain, there's the things that grow, which are tzomeach, there are things that are alive called chai, and then there are human beings, midaber. We had breathed into our essence this idea that we can speak and we can use our speech to create, following in God's example, who created heaven and earth, Vayomer Elokim, with speech. This, our essence is to speak. And this may be why using I statements can be very, very powerful. For example, if I were to say, "You're so kind," it's a very nice compliment and a true statement. However, it's much more impactful if I say, "I am overwhelmed by all of the kindness you perform for me." when we speak in ways which express our essence, we more deeply connect with the other. When we speak against people that we disagree with, when it seems to delegitimize them, and not necessarily be about a disagreement about ideas or opinions or facts. The idea of speaking against a person can be very destructive. And we live in an age of miscommunication or selective communication. People have made up their minds before speaking and aren't interested in what others are saying. Stephen Covey once said, "Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply." Not even thinking about what the other person is saying. We already know what we're going to say before the other person says anything at all. And long before him, Plato said, "Wise men speak because they have something to say. Fools speak because they have to say something." We've lost sometimes the ability for quiet and attentive listening and considering our words before saying, or even being open to our views being shifted by what we hear from the other person. Sefer Bereshit is viewed as a guidebook. Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim, the ways of the fathers are a guidepost for the children. Bereshit sets the stage for the emergence of the Jewish people in Sefer Shemot. And in that book of Bereshit, we have numerous examples and lessons about how to act. It is, as the Midrash references it, and the Netziv picks up upon it, Sefer HaYashar, the book which tells us how to follow in the straight path and to do the right thing. Our patriarchs and matriarchs teach us the power of communication and also the dangers and the weakness of miscommunication. Recently, David Brooks wrote an op-ed entitled 9 Non-Obvious Ways to Have Deeper Conversations. And he picks up on the trends that we know exist in society of people speaking past each other. And essentially, we need to be better listeners, to be more attentive, to be genuinely interested in what others think and have to say, to be like Plato's wise men and speak because we have something to say, and not just to listen only so that we can reply with what we want to say. As midabrim, as human beings whose essence and whose power is to speak, we are what we say and how we say it. Learning from the lessons of our patriarchs and matriarchs, looking at what's going on and seizing the opportunities we have to speak with one another in a genuine, constructive way. We have to make sure that our lashon, our tongues, our speech are used l'chaim, for life, for impactful, elevating, meaningful, and caring conversations that elevate, and not, God forbid, that do the opposite. Just please make sure, don't talk during davening.